Let's see. All right, so Ben is asking, how do we build an indicator when the Bollinger breaks out of a Keltner channel and triggers? And let's see, you want to go long with the direction of the stochastic K. Let's see. All right. So we're looking for the Bollinger to break out of the Keltner and go along with the stochastics K. And okay, yeah, we'll just use the default periods for all these indicators. All right, I think I have everything on the chart. So I have a stochastic on here. So the trade direction is going to be in the direction of the stochastic, and we're looking for the Bollinger. So the gray line is the Bollinger. Here, how about if I make one subtle change here. I'll make the Bollinger red. And the Keltner's blue, so that ought to be a pretty good contrast. Alright, so let's see, we're looking for the red to break out of the blue. So, let me identify a couple of points. So there's a breakout, and there's a breakout, and there's another breakout. Let's see, I'm just going to make sure that, yeah, oh, the Keltner's a 10 period. Here, let me make them both a 14 period. Not sure if that matters, but yeah, that way the midlines are similar. Alright, so let me adjust these breakouts. So here's a breakout. Here's a breakout. And there's another breakout. Alright, so to find these breakouts, what they look like to me is just a simple crossover situation. Right, so we've got the upper bands, you know, so if the upper Bollinger band crosses over, you know, crosses above the Keltner upper band, then that's a breakout. And then if the lower Bollinger band breaks below the Keltner, then that's another breakout. So we're going to use a couple of crossover solvers. So for the upper band, right, we're only interested when the Keltner crosses above, when the Keltner crosses up. For the lower band, we're only interested when the Keltner crosses below. So alright, so let's, now that we kind of have things identified on the chart, so when you're starting off building a system, you know, I suggest that you find, you know, your trade setups, you know, your ideal conditions, find them on the chart and mark them up for yourself, so that way you have a reference point that you can work with on the chart and start from there. So, alright, let's open up BloodHound. And the first thing I need to do is name this system. So I'm just going to use today's workshop date. So let's change the date on there. Okay. And let's see. And I'm going to start working on the logic template this time as well. So right, this is a new BloodHound system. So there's no logic template defined yet, so I had to hit new, and we'll give this a name. Okay, so we'll call this a Bollinger / Keltner breakout. Alright, so I'm going to start off using a crossover. So we're going to need a couple of crossovers here. Let's drop 2 crossovers down here. Okay, so let's connect up the first one. And let's see, so this first one will be looking at the upper bands. So let's see. I'm gonna abbreviate the names here. So we got a Bollinger and Keltner, and this is gonna be the upper band crossover. Alright, I'll just use XO for crossover abbreviation there. Okay, so in A, we're going to put the Bollinger, and in B, we're going to put the Keltner here. So let's set this up. And it's important to make sure that you have your indicator settings matching the chart. So I don't think, hold on, I'm going to take a look at the chart again. So I think, yeah, my Bollinger is using a 1 standard deviation and a 14 period. Okay, so let's go back into BloodHound and adjust the Bollinger settings here. So instead of a 2 period, I need to change that to a 1 standard deviation. So, actually, you know what? I think I only need 1 crossover solver. So when, oh wait, no, actually I do need 2. Yeah. Let's see, yeah, I need 2 because the trade direction is going to be with the stochastics. Yeah, all right. So we're checking the upper bands, so we'll just check long and short for the upper bands. And now down here, we'll put the Keltner indicator into B. And I think I'm just using a 1 multiple offset and a 14 period. And so for the Keltner, let's select the upper band as well. And let me just double check the settings on my Keltner here, the blue one. And yeah, 1 and 14. Okay, great. Alright, so we can see when the red Bollinger crosses above, right, long signal crosses below short signal. So we're not interested in the crossing below. So when the Bollinger crosses inside the Bollinger, we're not interested in that signal there. So let's turn that off. So in the solver here, we have the evaluate. So we just want to evaluate long signals only in this case. So now we're just left with the long signals there. All right. Now this cross above, according to Ben's rules, we're not looking for long signals based on the bands crossing up, right? The direction of the trade depends on the slope of the stochastic. So this cross above could be a long trade or a short trade. So we need both a long and a short signal here, right? And the stochastic is actually going to determine the direction of the trade. So I'm going to grab a long-short modifier, like so. This long-short modifier can take that long signal and convert it or modify it into a long and a short both. But what I need to do is I need to change my mode to do that. So I think I can just use the addition here. Yeah, there we go. So now if you look down here at BloodHound, let me expand that open. All right, so now BloodHound's giving a long and a short signal. So another way of saying this is that, right, when the Bollinger breaks out of the Keltner, that's a non-directional condition. The direction of the trade is determined by the stochastics. So, and all right, so let's see. Yeah, so we're ready to work on now the lower bands. So let's find this breakout of the lower band here. And it looks like we had an upper band breakout right afterwards. All right, so this second crossover is pretty much, it's going to be the same as this one, except we're just going to select the lower bands instead. All right, so let's see. I'm going to just copy that name, paste that in there. So this is going to be the lower band. All right, so let me just quickly put the indicators in there. All right, so we're using a standard deviation of 1, period of 14. This time we're looking at the lower bands, so let's select that. All right, now we need to put the Keltner into B. And let's change the settings. There we go, so 1 and 14 again. And we're using the lower band plot. Select that like that. And oh, let's connect that guy up. Okay, so there we go. There's our lower bands crossing each other like so. And yep, there we go. I could have marked that guy like that. Either way. Okay, so when we look at this, right, when the Bollinger breaks out, we get a short crossover, right? So the lower Bollinger band is crossing down over the Keltner. So we're only interested in, for the lower band, we're only interested in the short signal. We're not interested when the Bollinger breaks inside the Keltner. So we want to get rid of these long signals here. So we're just going to do the same thing, change our evaluate to short only, like so. Right. And so there's our short crossovers only when the Bollinger breaks outside of the Keltner for the lower bands. And we'll grab another long short modifier. Alright, so we want to get a long and a short signal here at the same time. So we're going to change our mode. Once again, change it to addition. And there we go. We get a long and a short together. Alright. Now, we need to join the upper band crossovers together with the lower band crossovers. So let's grab an OR node. So an OR node is a way of taking multiple signals and just joining them all together into one output, like so. Alright, so now we can scroll through and we can see the upper and lower band crossovers together, like so. So let's see, I think we're probably only interested in the first signal, so whichever band fires off a crossover first is probably the only one we're interested in. So we could clean this up a little bit and just capture the first signal and remove the second signal that might happen right afterwards. So I'll show you how to do that. So the way we can get rid of the second signal here, let's see, I'll just keep this one on here, is I can use the signal blocker to do that. Connect that in like that, and let's see, I don't need any resets. This is a pretty simple use of the signal blocker. So I just need to block just the second signal if it ever happens. So if I just need to block the second signal, let's see, I just need to block for two bars. I just need to block signals for 2 bars, and I can turn off all of the I can turn off all of my other resets. So all of these resets are all turned off, and I just simply need to block for two bars, and oops, call it good enough. So there we go. So that kind of cleaned it up a little bit, right? So I think, you know, in actuality, the signal blocker is probably not really needed. So it's just a matter of preference, right? Now let's see the last step. The last step is to take our long and short output and filter it with the stochastics. So we need to filter it with the slope of the stochastics here. So let's grab a slope solver like so. Alright, we'll connect that up. And let's change the name here. So we're going to look at the stochastics. And next step, input or select our stochastics indicators. Let's open that up. Go down to the stochastics, and I'm just going to use the default indicator settings. And Ben had, let's see, wants to use the D in this case. Alright, so as we look at that slope solver, you know, pretty simple enough. Stochastic is sloping down, we're getting short output. Sloping up, we're getting a long output. So this is going to determine the direction of the trade. So last step here is we're going to take our crossover signals and filter them out with our stochastic slope, and to do that we're going to use an AND node. So whenever you're doing any kind of filtering, you're almost always going to want to use the AND node. So let's cross that in there, connect that up. Right, okay, so there's a bunch of signals on the chart. Now let's connect our stochastics filtering up, and there we go. So that is it. And yep, we got a bunch of signals back here. So, all right, pretty straightforward. So a couple of the key things, you know, about this is since we're dealing with an upper band and a lower band, right? Just think of those as almost different indicators unto themselves. So because we're dealing with an upper band and a lower band, 2 different plot lines, we had to use 2 different crossover solvers to do this. And then we just join them together with an OR node. Yeah, and you know, if you to optimize this, yeah, I could even further optimize this. So you know, the less nodes that you use, clearly the more optimized your system is, and the faster it runs, right? The less work that your processor has to calculate, the less, every time you add a node, that requires processing power to, calculate what the node is actually doing. So I could optimize this. In this particular case, this is going to work out, but I could optimize this by, I can eliminate one of these long-short modifiers, and I can actually put these two together into this OR node like this. Right, let's connect that up. So, right, so we're kind of back to the beginning where we got the upper band and lower band crossing over, separate long and short signals. So I can take this OR node, connect it in to just one long short modifier, and then it gives me the same results here. Right, so now you can see I'm taking the OR node and modifying it, and I'm getting both my long and short outputs here. Then it only takes just one long short modifier. And then I can connect that into the signal blocker. Take a look at that. And I get the same result. But if you're new to BloodHound and stuff, don't worry about optimization so much. It's more important just to get the system built. So, all right. So let me take a look at the board, see if there's any questions on this or any comments. Let's see. Don is asking, is the green line price? No, this is a stochastics indicator, Don. So this is not price. So the stochastic runs on its own scaling system from 0 to 100. Let's see. Yeah, Don's asking a unique question here. So NinjaTrader allows you to kind of do some really neat, funky things on the chart, and these kind of unique visuals only work on a chart, but they can't be calculated in an indicator. So what Don is asking, I'm going to add another indicator here. So let me get another stochastics on here. Alright, so I have a second stochastics down here, and I can drag this guy up onto price. And so now, right, we can see I have stochastics on price, right? We're seeing it on price, and we can see, hopefully you guys can see that, let me brighten this up a little bit. There we go. So you guys should be able to see the green dotted line, which is 80, and the reddish dotted line, which is 20. So Don's asking, can we detect if price crosses this 20 or 80? And no, you can't, because price is up here at 4,500, but this red dotted line is at 20. So even though you see it crossing on the chart, mathematically they're not even close to each other. Where one's at 4,500, whereas our lines are at 20 and 80. So mathematically they never cross each other. So this is just an illusion, that NinjaTrader allows you to do with the chart, right? So the stochastic has, let's use this, right? So the stochastic has a scaling over here on the left, and it's still 0 to 100, right? Whereas the price is over on this side, and the price is at 4,500. So mathematically there is no crossover, so you can't do that with an indicator. So I'd say it'd be hard pressed to even write a custom indicator to do that. I think you probably could have a custom indicator written to do this, but it would be pretty involved. It would take a programmer probably several days to come up with some kind of custom indicator to detect price crossing, a a different scaled indicator. Yeah. So, because part of the problem you have is whenever you scroll back like this, the price scaling, right? If you look at price on the right, its scaling changes all the time as I scroll back and forth, right? You can see, like, look up here at 45.32, right? Now that's off the chart. That's not even on the chart anymore. So trying to detect crossovers like this really mathematically would be a very difficult challenge, and your crossovers are going to change all the time. Yeah, here, let's see, let's put, let's see, yeah, so we have a crossover right there, right? So hopefully you guys can see that, and I'll even mark it with an arrow. So I try to get the tip of the arrow right at that crossover right there. Now all I have to do is move a little bit, and boom, look, now the crossover's gone. Crossover disappeared. So, how can you detect these crossovers? I guess you could do it in real time, but you wouldn't be able to back test anything like that, because you can just see that crossover is no longer there. The crossover now is like up over here, right? And if I change this again, right, crossover is not over here anymore, it's now back here. Yeah. All right, Don, I hope that kind of helps point out some of the logistical issues that have to be overcome for looking for that type of a crossover. All right, let's get rid of this stochastics. So if there's nothing else, I'll move on to the next solver on the list. So the next solver on the list is the support and resistance solver. Alright, so I'm going to use the pivot line, the pivot indicator, to demonstrate our support and resistance. So here's a critical condition to be aware of with NinjaTrader. So NinjaTrader has acknowledged that the pivot indicator or any other indicator that has this calculate from intraday data or has this daily bars option, this daily bars option doesn't function correctly inside the pivots indicator when you're using the pivots indicator for a strategy, or if you're using the pivots indicator inside of another indicator. So in other words, when you're using the pivots indicator inside of BloodHound, using the daily bars doesn't function correctly. So there's an internal oversight with Ninja's data feed engine. So I guess what that means is that you can't use the daily bar setting when you're using the pivots indicator or any other indicator that might have a daily bars setting. You can't use that setting when using the indicator inside of BloodHound or inside of a strategy. So if you're using the pivots indicator, make sure that you're using calculate from intraday data. Okay, and so this mode, Ninja has acknowledged that mode works correctly when you're using the pivots inside of a strategy or another indicator. So yeah, we'll just leave that there, and Looks like everything else is okay. Alright, so we have a S1 on the chart there. Yeah, I'll make my width a little bit longer. No, I'll keep it there. Alright, so if you're using an indicator as support and resistance, it doesn't have to be the pivots indicator. I'm just using this as my example. You could use a moving average as your support resistance. So let me put that on there as well. I'll just drop an SMA on here. So it's fairly common practice to use some type of a really large period moving average as your support resistance. So let's say we're using like a large period moving average as your support resistance, or a pivots indicator, something like that, or the Murray math indicator. So that's the support resistance solver is designed so that you can see where price is in relationship to your support and resistance indicator, right? So I'm going to use the pivots indicator first because it really kind of demonstrates the power of the support resistance solver a lot better than just a single SMA would. So let's open this up. Alright, I'm going to create a new logic template. So this one is going to be our support and our support resistance solver. There we go. Alright, so just for the new people in the room, right? So I have two logic templates now. So this is kind of one of the powers of BloodHound is you can create different logic templates, and they can contain totally different trading systems, and so you can switch back and forth between the different trading systems that you have. So alright, so let's put our support resistance solver on the board here. So the support resistance solver is by far one of the I'd say the most complex solver, and it's just due to how people can use support and resistance, right? Support resistance can be used in many ways. So so this solver needs a lot of different options to kind of cover all the different ways that you could analyze support resistance. So we're going to analyze headwind mode first. So the solver has two different modes, headwind mode and tailwind mode. So headwind mode, think of headwind mode as if we're here and we're taking a long trade, right? If we're taking a long trade, well, hold on. I don't want to use the SMA, I'm going to use the pivot. So let me find a better spot on the chart. Here we go. Here's a better spot. Alright, let's say we're up here and we want to take a short trade. Well, we have support right below us. So a lot of ways that people use support resistance is, to check, how close are they, how close is price to the nearest support line, right? Because you don't want to trade right into a support line, right? So you want to know, do you have enough room? Is there enough room to take a trade into the closest support line, like what we have right here, right? Obviously, so if you're up here taking a short, right, there's a lot more room from this point than there is from this point, right? So from here, depending on your trading style, you may say that, well, there's not enough room here to take a trade from here, but there is enough room from this point to take a trade, to take a short trade into support. So that's what headwind mode does. Is headwind mode will analyze, is there enough room to take a trade into your support or resistance. Now tailwind mode, let's switch this to tailwind mode. Tailwind mode is basically the opposite. Tailwind mode is designed to locate or identify when price is right up against our support or resistance to take a bounce trade off of it. So if you like looking for bounces off of support or resistance, so for example, say like right here you want to take this as some kind of a bounce, and go long. Tailwind mode will detect when price is close enough to your support resistance to take that bounce trade. So, right, tailwind mode's not going to tell you that there's a bounce trade, it just tells you that price is close enough. Alright, so the support resistance solver is just checking distances. It's checking the distance of price to the nearest support or resistance line. Right, so support resistance solver isn't going to tell you that there's a bounce trade. It's just telling you that you're close enough, and then you'll have to look at your various other, I don't know, price action conditions or indicator conditions to further tell you if you actually want to take, a bounce trade, something like that. So, all right, so let's cover headwind mode first. So, and I'm going to cover the use indicator setting first. I'll get back to using the channel and price point intervals later on. So let me cover the indicator first. So we'll set that to true. So I guess just to summarize, the support resistance solver has 3 different ways that you can generate support and resistance lines. So there's 3 different options here. So using an indicator is the most common used option here. So that's why I'm going to start off with this one first. Then I'll explain the other 2 afterwards here. So, all right, before I get going, it looks like Don has a question. Let's see. Yeah, so Don is asking, can you generate entry and exit signals from a support resistance lines? And yes, you can. And so Don, this support resistance solver is here to kind of help do that. So, not knowing much about, I guess not having a lot of detail in your question, probably the way you phrased your question, you would probably want to use tailwind mode, but we'll get to that later on. Okay, so when I turn this to true, you can see this new section here opens up. Right, so this indicator section opens up when this is set to true. Right, so this allows us to put in our indicator here. So let's change this to our pivot indicator. There we go, pivot indicator. And as I explained earlier, we got to remember that we can't use the pivot indicator with daily bars because there's a little technical issue with Ninja's data feed when you do that. So we'll change this to calc from intraday data. And so here's one of the things that's unique about the support resistance solver is it has this check all option. So the support resistance solver has the ability to analyze multiple plot lines here. So so that's why I'm using the pivots indicator, because it has 7 different support resistance lines here. Yeah, 7. Yeah. So if you want, we could just analyze, a couple of them, right? I could just analyze the PP and R1 and S1. I could select whatever I want. I could just analyze the PP and then R2 and S2 if I want, right? I can ignore R1 and S1. So you can select whatever you need, whatever you're wanting to analyze as your support resistance lines. So I'm just going to select all here, and we'll click OK. Now there's an input option here. So the default is the closing price. So the solver is going to be comparing the closing price of the bar. So let's go back to this little arrow. So it's going to be comparing the closing price of the bar and measure it down to our nearest support line, like so. So like this bar, the hollow bars are up bars. So the support resistance would be comparing the closing price of the bar down to the nearest resistance. So for example here, this bar closed below S1, so the nearest support would be down there for support, and of course resistance would be just a tick above it. So the solver is also comparing the closing price up to the nearest resistance line, like so. Right, so the support resistance solver is always, it's looking at where price is and then using the nearest support line or resistance line, like so. So I think price is just a little too close to S1 to be able to draw an arrow in there, but literally literally the solver is going to take the closing price and compare it to S1, which is, looks like it's 3 ticks above it. Yeah. So all right. So if you have I don't know, you could really come up with some complex, unique kind of support resistance things that you're looking to analyze, and so you do have the ability to look at the other 3 prices of the bar, right? So you can analyze the open price, the high or the low of the bar, whatever price you need when you want to analyze, where price is in relationship to your support resistance. So, all right, next step is our distances. So, this is where you say. This is where you determine how, so for headwind mode, this is using the distance targets, is how you determine when price is too close to support resistance to take a trade. So you can set those distances in here. So let me get my chart cleaned up again. Alright, so to demonstrate how the distances work, I'm going to change it from ATRs to ticks. So just a quick explanation. ATRs is a way to kind of dynamically change your distance requirements based on market volatility. So if you're using like a minute charts, right, price action can get really volatile, and the ATR measures how volatile each bar is and it averages it out. So if the market gets more volatile, and using an ATR as your distance, kind of adjusts your distance requirements dynamically as the volatility picks up, within the instrument. But ATRs are hard to visualize on a chart, so I'm going to change them to ticks. So we're working with something that's fixed. So I'm going to set this up so that we require at least 20 ticks clearance, a 20 tick clearance before a trade can be taken. All right. So the support resistance essentially builds a filter. So if we don't have 20 ticks of clearance, then the support resistance solver can block the trade. So let's see. So back to this. You know, like on this bar, particular bar right here, you know, if we got a short signal on this bar, you know, if we want to make sure that we have at least 20 ticks clearance to the nearest support line, then we want to set these distance targets to 20 ticks, and that'll make sure that we have enough distance clearance to take a short trade into our support line. So actually, I'm going to knock this up. Let's see. 15. Yeah, I'm going to knock this up to 80. There. Okay. That's a little better. All right. Okay, so let's look at BloodHound's output and pay attention. So the support resistance solver, you know, when we're looking at it directly, it looks a little messy. And right off the bat, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense and that's because the support resistance solver isn't really used to generate trade signals. It's more used as a filter, right? It's that filter where you say to yourself, you know, I don't want to take a trade if I'm too close to support, right? You don't want to take a short trade right into this S1 support line. So the support resistance is a filter, not a trade signal. So that's why the output here looks a lot different than what you're expecting. So what we're looking at is that we need at least 80 ticks of clearance here to take a short trade or to take a long trade. So to take a short trade, so on this bar, since there is no short output, right? So if we look here, right, there's no short output. And of course we do have a short output here on this bar. So the bars that have no short output, what that's saying is that this distance here, so this distance that I'm drawing with all these arrows, this distance is less than 80 ticks. So in other words, we're too close to our support line to take a trade. It's too close. We're less than 80 ticks away. However, right here, the closing price of this bar is more than 80 ticks away. So that's why we have a short output here. So the short output is saying that there's enough distance to take a short trade into support. Right? There's enough distance. So it gives us a short output, and the short output is the permission to take a short trade. So if we look back here, we can see that all of these bars line up with all of these short outputs, right? And so we can see that price is far enough away, it's far enough away from our S1 line to take a short trade into S1. Alright, and so the same thing goes with all these long outputs. So let's take a look here. So the distance from the closing price of this bar up to the PP line is more than 80 ticks away. So there's at least an 80 tick clearance up to resistance, and that's why we're getting a long output here, right? So price, the current closing price of all these bars is more than 80 ticks away from the PP line, so that means we can take a long trade because we have enough distance. So this distance is great enough that we can take a long trade into resistance. Now if I keep scrolling back, let's see if price moves up. Well, we're in the overnight session here. Oh, here we go. So now we can see we have a bunch of bars where essentially price is too close to the PP line to take a long trade into that resistance line. And we know that because there's no long output anymore. So the solver would not give us the permission to take a long trade, right? So another way of saying that is that the solver would filter out any long trade signals. It would remove them. So let's see. I want to actually get some trade signals going in here. Let's see. All right. I'm just going to build a simple crossover solver that kind of generates some trade signals here. And so I'm just going to build something real simple. So whenever price crosses, I guess our Bollinger Band midline, so you can see the gray midlines on here. So whenever price crosses that midline, I'm just going to use that. It's just some simple signals to help demonstrate how the support resistance can be used. So I'm going to look for closing price crossing that Bollinger midband. So yeah, we'll just use a 14 period. We're going to use the midband like so. And interesting. I thought I had a crossover there, but actually the closing price didn't actually cross. Let's see, the high price crossed. But let's see. I was hoping to generate some long signals here. So I'm going to generate something that's going to make even more trade signals here. Okay. There we go. Alright, so we got lots of signals here, lots of longs and shorts. So this will help illustrate my point. Alright, so we can see S1 and our pivot point line up here. So remember the rectangular area, actually let's stretch this out here. So this is the area where price is too close to the pivot point line, right? And so this support resistance solver is missing the long signals here, right? They're missing the long signals there. So if, let me grab an AND node. Right, so we're looking at all of these trade signals, all these random crazy trade signals. Now if I take my support resistance solver, plug that in, now we can see that all of the long signals have been filtered out. Right, so all these long signals have been filtered out in this rectangular area, and as we move down, now we start to get some long signals here, and that's because there's enough distance, there's enough clearance to take a long trade into our resistance line up here. Right, so that's how you use, that's the primary use for the support resistance solver, is as a filter. So you take your trade signals with an AND node and then set up the support resistance solver to generate basically a filter or a permission to take a trade into your resistance line or into your short line or into your support line. So let's go back here. Actually, I'm going to take a look. Yeah, I'm going to scroll forward on the chart, and yeah, so there's a couple of spots where price is too close to S1 to take a short trade, right? So there's no short output from our support resistance solver, right? There's no short output, so this is going to block any short signals that may be generated here. So let's see if there is actually any short signals. Yeah, I can see 3. So, right, there's a short signal there, there, and there. There we go. So I've got my arrows on the short signals. So now let's take a look at the AND node where the signals are filtered out. And so now we can see those short signals got filtered out and removed because price is too close to the S1 line to take a trade into it. Alright, so that in a sense is headwind mode. So there is one more section here. So we have the output section. So you can kind of control the various output aspects. So let's see, the first one here, at 80 ticks using the ideal distance. So this says ideal distance, and if you look at the distance targets, we have an ideal distance. So this minimum distance and ideal distance allows you to use BloodHound's fuzzy logic part. So we can use. I'll give you a quick demo of using the fuzzy logic aspect, but most people don't use BloodHound's fuzzy logic, so I won't go into a lot of detail. But let's see. Let's go 50. So let's say 50 ticks is our minimum. We would prefer our ideal distance. We prefer to see 80 ticks. So let's connect up our support resistance solver. So now, so if you look at the output now, you can see that the short output here right, so we can see the short output on some of these bars is varying, so it gives us, so we're using the BloodHound's fuzzy logic part of it. So say like on this bar right here with the green dot, it just barely has a short output. You can just see a little sliver of a short output. And so what that is saying, is, let's see here. So it's looking at the closing price and looking at that distance. So what that's saying is that this distance from this bar is essentially just a little more than 50 ticks, right? And so from this bar, right, there's more than 50 ticks, and so that's why there's a greater, shorter output. That's why the output is greater, because we have more distance. There's more distance, whereas on this bar there's less distance. And so when you have just a very small output here, like that short output's really small, and this bar as well. Let me get rid of these. So this bar here also has a very small output. So what that's saying is that the closing price of these two bars is almost 50 ticks away. It's a little more than 50 ticks. And so let's take a look at the solver. Right, so our minimum distance is 50 ticks. So if we at least have 50 ticks, or a little bit more than 50 ticks, we're going to start getting a output here. So that's just using fuzzy logic, the fuzzy logic part of this solver here. So it kind of allows you to create kind of a variance in your distance requirements. So, but most people just have an absolute number that they say, you know what, I need 80 ticks and that's it. If it's less than 80 ticks, I'm not going to take the trade. So for the most part, you'll just want to set your minimum and your ideal distance to 80 ticks, and then that generates this digital type of an output here. All right, so we have at 80 ticks. So in other words, so this output is set to 1, so it's turned on. So when we have at least 80 ticks of clearance, 80 tick difference, we want to see an output. If there's less than 80 ticks, if we're at 80 ticks or less, then we don't want any output, so it's set to 0. Right, so in other words, like this example, so these two bars here, this arrow and this arrow, basically the areas with the triangles, right? There's less than 80 ticks from price to S1, and since there's less than 80 ticks, our output is 0. So that's why there's no output here, because it's set to 0. Now the last one here, if there's no support and resistance, so I'm going to shrink the chart up a lot here. Yeah, there we go. Right, so this area, right, is below S3, so there's no more support below us. If price goes into this area, there's no more support. If price goes up here into this area, there's no more resistance lines, right? So we're above R3 resistance, so we're above all the resistance lines. So if you're above or below all of your resistance or support lines, then you can choose to then you can set this, you can choose that it's okay to take, so let's say if price moves below S3, then if you're okay to take a short trade when you're below your last support line, if you're below your last support line, if it's still okay to take a short trade, then you would set this to 1 as it is. So what this no support resistance, what it's saying is it's okay to take a short anytime we're below all of our support lines. And it's also saying it's okay to take a long trade if price is above all of our resistance lines. So if price is up here, we can take a long trade anytime. And so that's what this does, is it turns that on and off. And so I'm going to scroll back and see if that actually ever happens. So that way you can get a visual on this. And doesn't look like it ever happens. All right, let me add a few more days to the chart, and I'll give this one more shot here. All right, I'm going to turn this output off so I can quickly spot if price breaks above or below all of the pivot lines. Oh, here we go. Great. I found a day where that happens here. Yeah. So here's S3. Let me shrink this up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. All right, so here's S3 and R3, and we can see price is below our last support line. So with this set to 1, that means that we're clear to take a short trade anytime price breaks below. And in other words, what it's saying is that there's no more support. There's absolutely no more support lines below price anymore. And so the solver is saying you're clear to take a short trade, right? So if if you don't like that, if you need price to be at least above some support line, so in other words, if you consider price being below your last support line, if you consider that to be too oversold and you don't want to take any more short trades, then what you can do is just turn this off like so. And let me turn the other one back on here. Right, so now we can see, right, we can take some long trades here into S3 as long as price is far enough away. And then let's get into the next day here. And so right now, price is too close to the pivot point lines, too close to the white line here to take any short trades. That's why there's no short output here. So, yeah. All right. So, I hope that was clear. So I'm just going to put this back to the default settings here. So, all right. Well, before I get into Tailwind mode, let me just take a look at the board and see what kind of questions we have. All right. So Don's got a good question. He's asking, will this work with custom support resistance lines? Don, this works with any indicator that generates plot lines. So if your custom support resistance line indicator plots lines on the chart, then that's what the solver will work with that. So basically all the solvers will work with any indicator that plots lines on the chart. So the indicator doesn't have to just plot lines on the chart, an indicator can also have what's called a data series. So let's see if I can find an example. Trying to find an example of an indicator that has a data series built into it. So, okay, well, yeah. So this Anna Heiken-Ashi, it's not a support resistance indicator, but it does have data series in here. So we can see that there's the Heiken-Ashi open price and the Heiken-Ashi close price in a data series. You know, so any solver can use a data series to get its information from. So in the case of the support resistance solver, you know, the support resistance solver could use can use a data series if it, you know, assuming these data series contain your support resistance values, right? So okay, let me put the pivots indicator back in here. Alright, let's see, there's a couple more questions on here. Let's see, so Don uses fib numbers, okay, for his support resistance. Yeah, so Don, as long as your indicator spits out those fib values, right, so I'm assuming it's going to be fib values on price, on the price panel. So as long as your indicator spits out, you know, plots out those fib lines, those fib values, then right, then you can go into the support resistance solver and, you know, select your various fib lines, you know, your fib values as plots. All right, yeah. So Frank, I'll address your question after I'm done explaining the support resistance solver. So Frank is asking, can the support resistance solver be used to generate a signal when there is a breakthrough? Yeah, so if price breaks through a support resistance line, can the support resistance solver generate a signal? Yes, and so that would be tailwind mode. Yeah, tailwind mode. However, probably it would take more than just the single solver itself. But I'm going to cover tailwind mode next. So Frank, you should be able to determine if tailwind mode works for your situation here. So I'm thinking you probably would want to use a crossover solver instead, Frank. But I don't know the details exactly of what you're doing. But either the crossover or tailwind mode on the support resistance solver. Alright, so let's see, tailwind mode. Alright, so I switched this to tailwind mode. Our indicator is still set to the pivots, but our distance targets changed. So, right, when you're using tailwind mode, that's a different way of comparing price to your support resistance lines. So the distance targets change. So now we can see we have ideal distance and maximum distance, where if I go back to headwind mode, we have minimum distance and ideal distance. So let's put it back on tailwind mode. So, right, and so once again, tailwind mode, the distances are set to ATRs. So let me change these guys over to ticks. Alright, so ticks are going to be easier to see. So let's see. So what we're going to do is we're going to determine when price gets within 10 ticks of one of our pivot lines. Right? So price has to get within 10 ticks of one of our pivot lines. And so simply all that's telling us is that, hey, price, you know, is within 10 ticks of your support resistance line. and then you can decide from there what else to do with it. So let's see. All right, I'm going to make S1 a little thicker here. There's a lot going on here. All right, hopefully you can see that thicker S1 line now a little better. So we can see price is basically consolidating around S1, and so when price is above our support resistance line, right? Basically, if price is above it, it becomes support, and so we're going to get a long signal. So if price is just above it, we're getting a long signal here. Let's stretch this out even more. There. All right, let me make one more change here. Try and get this chart stretched out. There we go. All right. So we can see our red S1 line. Price is just above it, and so we're getting a long output from the support resistance solver. So it's telling us, so that's just telling us that price is above a support line and it's within 10 ticks of it, right? And then eventually price moves up enough so that distance there, so this distance here is more than 10 ticks away. Let's see, and so now price is below our line, so now it becomes resistance, and so we get a short output here. And as long as price is within 10 ticks, it'll give us a short output. So like over here, right, so over here, essentially price is more than 10 ticks away from our S1 line, and so there's no short output. And now up on this bar, the closing price right here is within 10 ticks of our S1 line. So right, so you can, hopefully you can see now that in tailwind mode we're going to get a long or short depending on which side of our line that price is on. Right? So if you're using some kind of a support resistance line to kind of look for bounce trades, right? So that's what this tailwind mode is essentially is for. So we can see that as you know, price has gotten close enough to S1 that we might possibly get a bounce off of it. So yeah, in this particular case we didn't. We just got a lot of consolidation around it, but this solver essentially gives you a heads up, you know, that hey, price is close enough to our support resistance line that we might get a bounce off of it, and so you can start use that with the rest of your logic or the rest of your trading conditions to kind of, you know, to prepare for maybe a possible bounce trade and take a long trade off of that S1. So let's get back into BloodHound here, and so typically, once again, most people usually have just some kind of a fixed distance that they need price to get, you know, within their support or resistance line. So typically you'll use this to set both values to the same size, but you know, we can use the fuzzy logic. So if I set this to, say, 30 ticks, and yeah, here we go. So take a look at this right here, so we can see that there's just a little tiny long output. And since we're using a fuzzy logic, so when we get to our maximum distance of 30 ticks, BloodHound's going to start giving us some of an output, right? So what that's saying is that, let's see, this bar. So the closing price from here to our nearest support line is just under 30 ticks. Right, so that distance is just under 30 ticks. So we reached our minimum distance of 30 ticks, and we're starting to get an output. And then as price gets closer and closer, as price is moving down and gets closer and closer to our support line, we can see that BloodHound's, the output, I should say the solver's output, is increasing. So, and eventually on this bar, right here, this bar, finally we get within our 10 tick ideal distance, and we can see BloodHound's output is 1. So we get 100% output. Whereas down here, it looks like we got about 1 or 2% of an output here because price is essentially 30 ticks away. And then here, price got 10 ticks or closer. This could be even closer than 10 ticks. So that's how you can use the fuzzy logic part of tailwind mode. So let's just put 10 ticks back in there. Right. And once again, if there is no support or resistance, if we break out, you could turn that on. I can't think of any practical reason why you would, in tailwind mode, I can't think of any practical reason why you'd want to use no support resistance. So that is off by default, right? Whereas if I change this to headwind mode, we can see it's on by default. But in tailwind mode, this doesn't have any practical purpose, but I don't know. Trading ideas are, infinite, so somebody might find a use for this. All right, I think I think I've covered tailwind mode and headwind mode. So use channel. So the use channel, this is the regression channel here. So if I turn this on, right? So if I turn this on, you see it's going to turn the use indicator off. It turned that off. So you can only use one of these 3 settings here at a time. So if I use price points, if I set that to true, right, it's going to turn the other 2 off. So let's put on use channel here. Set this to true, and let's see, tailwind mode. So what this is going to do is, if you want to use the regression channel as your support resistance line, that's what this use channel will do. So the regression channel is kind of a funky indicator, so it needs a little special conditions here. So if we're going to use the regression channel, then down here are the settings for the regression channel, right? So we have a period and a width for the regression channel. So let me get a regression channel on my chart so we can visually see it. And first, I'm going to fade the pivot indicator into the background. All right, I'm going to grab the Anna regression channel. So this is a great regression channel because it works historically. It works backwards on your chart, where the regression channel for NinjaTrader does not work backwards on the chart. So let's add that guy, and let me beef up the channel lines here. Make them a little thicker, easier to see. And alright, so I'm going to match the settings in the solver. Right, so if we look down here, the port resistance solver is using 50 and 4. So on my indicator on the chart, I'm going to set this to 50 and 4. Alright, so we can see the channel here. And bingo. Look at, there we go. So remember, when you're using a regression channel, you can't look at bars that are in the middle of your chart here, because let me shrink this up even more. So look at, as I scroll around, look at how the channel changes slope direction. Actually, you know what? 50 is a little too big. Let's cut this in half. I'll change it to 25. So now, yeah, the angle of the channel should be a little faster responsive. Yeah. So as you can see, as I'm scrolling through the chart, look at this distance here, and you can see it's changing all the time. So you can't look at something like this. You can't evaluate this correctly. You have to put this bar all the way to the right edge of the chart in order to evaluate price to a regression channel correctly, right? Because you can see how that distance is changing, right? So the regression channel is one of those really unique indicators. So what this is saying is, if we look at, get BloodHound open, and let me change. I need to change the solver, the period for the regression channel on the solver here to 25. There we go. All right. So now the period and the width matches what's on the chart. And all right. So let's take a look at what's happening right here. There we go. So we can see that price is really close to our lower channel line at this point. And we have the solver set up for tailwind, right? So when you have use channel set to true, you're using the regression channel lines, the lower channel line and the upper channel line. So let's see what happens here. So yeah, here, just to kind of illustrate my point again, right? It definitely looks like up here, you know, it looks like right there price is close enough to the channel line that we should be getting a short signal. But that's because we're looking at it, you know, midway into the chart. If right, if I scroll back, now we can see, you know, there's quite a bit, there's a more separation, there's a greater distance between the channel line and price. So that's why I didn't fire off. So let's take a look at this one here. So there we go, price is basically dead on that channel. And so we're getting basically a long signal for tailwind mode, because it's tailwind mode is identifying potential bounces off of that lower channel line. Now back here we can see we got a short trade. So let's scroll back and there. And let me just check the settings here. yeah, it looks like I'm getting a mismatch between the solver's regression channel and this anti-regression channel. I wonder if the two formulas are slightly different. That must be why I'm getting a short signal here, because the channel is up there. Well, actually, no, maybe that is 10 ticks. Let's see, we're on the NQ. Yeah, that is, alright, yeah, I guess that is within 10 ticks. Let's see, I'm going to build a little drawing aid here. Let's see, NQ moves in quarter tick increments. So, set that to 0. Okay, so this rectangle is 10 ticks high. Yeah, all right. So yeah, so the closing price is within 10 ticks of the upper channel line. So you know what, I think, yeah, 10 ticks is probably a little high. Let's set this to points. And how about if we just go 2 points, 2 points. And I can take my little measuring device and I'll set this to points. There you go, so that's a 2-point difference. And now if I measure that, yeah, all right. So it's, so if we measure this here, we can see, yeah, price is more than 10 ticks away. Let's go to the next bar, and yeah, price is just a little more than 2 points away. And it looks like over here, let's take a look. Yeah, so price just got within 2 points of the upper channel line. Right, so all right, so you can use a regression channel line in both tailwind and headwind mode. Right, I could set this to headwind mode, and let's see if we get any signals around here. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So if we look at price up to, oh no, actually I'm sorry, we got a short output because price broke below our only support line. Price is below the only support line, which is, right, so the only support line we have is the lower regression channel. Price broke below it, so we're free to take a short trade. Remember, this is for headwind mode now. And yeah, once again, price is below our regression channel line here and on the next bar. Let's see. And looks like, yeah, price broke above the upper channel here. So, yeah, you know, I don't know. Using the channel in headwind mode, I guess it doesn't seem to make much sense, but you can do it. All right, so that, you know, it's a quick demonstration of using the regression channel with the support resistance solver. So now let's use the price points here. So this says use price point intervals. So what this does is this creates fictitious price point intervals on your chart. Now you won't be able to see them on the chart, but the way it works is you have to set an interval. So if I set an interval, let's see, to 10, then what the solver is doing internally is it's going to start at a price value of 0, and every 10 points it's going to create a support resistance level, right? A theoretical support resistance level every 10 points. So let's 10 points, and so let me change these to points, and let's say we need a 5-point distance. Alright, so headwind mode. And hold on a moment while I fade this regression channel into the background. Alright, so I'm going to put some lines on the chart here. There we go. Okay. So here is, don't confuse it with this line up here. This is our SMA. Which, I never did use the SMA, did I? So I'll just take that off. Alright, so we have support resistance lines. I just drew them on here at 10-point increments, right? So this is 4,500, 4,510, and 4,520, right? So every 10 points. So let's take a look at, let me grab an arrow, let's take a look at this bar here. So we can see price is just below our 4510 support resistance line. And since it's just below it, it's too close to it to take a long trade, but it's far enough away from 4,500 down here. It's right. So that distance is far enough away to take a short trade into the 4,500. So just to kind of summarize this again, I don't think I need to go into a lot of detail, but using price point intervals, right, you can just create your own fictitious price point intervals. So you can set the interval, set the interval period, and then you can set an upper limit or a lower limit if you wish. So this is probably one of the lesser used features of this, but there are some trading styles out there where some people do just use kind of fictitious, well, not fictitious, but they use round whole numbers as natural support and resistance lines. You know, like you'll hear on the news that the Dow was reaching 1,800 or 18,000. You know, that 18,000 is a round whole number, and it's a kind of psychological resistance value, you know, for the mind. It's not a real resistance, but just that big number of 18,000 in itself is just a psychological, you know, so you could use this, you know, price point values to kind of build, you know, these psychological resistance values on price. You know, so probably maybe a more realistic use of this would be to use like 100. So that way, something like the 4500 is kind of the whole natural psychological support resistance value for the NQ. So that's how you can put those kind of numbers in there, right? All right, I think I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, I don't see any other questions in on here, so we'll leave it at that, and I'm going to set this back up to use the pivots line headwind mode, and let's see, I'll knock the points down to 2 there. Alright, I'll just leave this in that state like that. Alright, so Frank was asking, can you use the support resistance solver to generate signals when, let's see, when price breaks through a support resistance line? So, yeah, let me... Alright, let me go back to my indicators here. Alright, so I'm going to set this support resistance solver up for tailwind mode, and let's set tailwind up to 1 point, and alright, see if I can find some place on the chart that works here. And yep, here we go. There we go. Okay, so now S1, and S1's a little easier to see now. All right, let's take a look at this. So, so price basically broke the S1, right? And you got a long signal, and then it broke below it, and you got a short signal there, right? So if let's see, yeah, this worked out particularly well, but let's see. I just need to scan through the chart here and look for some other situations. Here we go. Here's what I'm looking for. All right, so like over here, let me grab an arrow. Over here, we are getting price breaking through the pivot point line, which I thought I had made that a little thicker. Let me make this thicker so it's easier to see. All right, so let's see. We have this long signal because price crossed it. However, we got a short signal because price didn't cross it. Right? So the solver by itself isn't giving you crossover signals. Like over here, this is what I was trying to find, this situation. We got a long signal, but it wasn't because price crossed. Price came down and quite literally bounced off of it. So if you're looking for crossover situations, yeah, I think probably what you want is a crossover solver. Let's see, let's grab a crossover solver, and we'll set A to price. So we're going to set A to price, and we'll just use the closing price, and we'll find out when the closing price crosses our pivot line here. Alright, need to set up the indicator correctly. Let's put it on intraday data. And let's see, the white line is the pivot point, so we have that selected. That looks good. And right, so now, yeah, with the crossover, it's more appropriate because this is not a crossover. But now we do have the crossovers like so. All right. There we go. Let's give that a little name. So, all right, Frank. So without any more detail, I guess that's about as far as I can go with your question. So let's see. Let's move on to Leonardo's question. Oh, okay, great. All right. Thanks, Leonardo. So let's let me pull up this screenshot that he took to help illustrate what he's trying to do here. All right, so there's the screenshot, and give me a moment to read his question. So he's provided a very thorough question, so I need to read through this here. All right, so Leonardo's trying to identify. Yeah, we can see this first area here. So he's trying to identify when BloodHound's output switches from no signal to a signal. So you can see what Leonardo's built is, gives you a continuous signals here, a bunch of continuous signals. So he's trying to identify when he's trying to, I guess, identify only the first bar when he gets a bunch of signals, right? So he just wants to identify the first bar of the signal, and then identify when the signal ends and goes into no output, right? So when there's no signal, he wants to identify that point at which there's no signal here. Yeah. So we can see over in this area we had short signals, so you'd want to identify when the short signals end, and then he wants to identify when the long signals begin, and just I guess just the one bar. So he wants to identify just the first bar when the signals begin, and the first bar when a signal ends. All right, and let's see. So it gives a simple system to build that will generate the same thing here. Let's see. So we're going to use, let's see, a 20, 50, and 200 SMA. All right, so give me some time, and I'll put that on the chart here. All right, switch to a 1 minute chart so we get a lot more bars with signals on them. And starting to get a lot of stuff on the charts here. So I'll beef up these lines here. Alright, so there's our 3 moving averages. So, alright, so we're going to do a little comparison here. We're going to compare when the 20 is above or below the 50, and the 50 is above or below the 200. Yeah, okay. So let's put this together real quick. So, I'll come up with a name for this in just a moment. Alright, so we're going to see if the SMA 20 is above or below the 50. So let's plug our SMAs in here, and all we got to do is just change the period. So both A and B are set to the SMA by default. So I just need to change the period. There we go. Oh, and let's connect that guy up. There. Alright. So what we're looking at is when the red line is below the blue line, we're getting a short, and when the red line is above the blue line, we're getting a long. So there we go. We'll grab something a little brighter. Make that blue line stand out a little more. Okay. Alright, so let's grab another comparison node and do the other one. Alright, this time we're comparing the 50 and seeing if the 50 is above or below the, what was it again, 200, yep. Alright, so once again we'll put the SMA 50 in A, and let's change the period. Down here in B, we'll set this to our 200 period. Alright, yep, so there's our crossover point right there. So the blue line's above the white line. Remember, the white lines are 200 SMA. Okay, so now we want to see when both of these conditions are in agreement. Okay, so there we go. This is something similar to what Leonardo has, right? We get these long continuous signals like this. And so the first part is, we just want to identify the very first bar. And we just want a signal on the very first bar. So these are going to be the entry signals. And then we want to identify the first bar when the signals disappear. So the first bar when the signal disappears, and same thing for a long situation. We want to identify the first bar and identify when it disappears. All right. So the easiest way to do that, so to identify the first bar, right, which is our entry. Our entry is on the first bar, of all these continuous signals. The easy ways to do that is what the signal blocker is built for. This is the prime purpose of the signal blockers, to do stuff like that. So let's plug that in there. So now, so let's take a look at this with the default settings here, right? So with the default settings, this isn't quite what we want, right? We're getting signals every 5 bars, right? So the signal blocker is set to block signals for 5 bars. So we need to beef this up a little bit. So let's try 100 bars. Let's see if that's enough. So that seems to be enough. All right. Now, if you remember, I marked the first bar with these arrows here. So we're not getting a signal on this arrow. We're getting it way down here. And remember, we had another arrow here. And let's move that arrow over. Yeah. So that just means that our resets are set incorrectly. So there's all different kinds of ways that you can reset the signal blocker, right? So right now, if I turn this all off, okay, everything's set to false. So right now the signal blocker is just blocking for 100 bars, and then it's waiting for the next one to come along. So that's why, so we started blocking over here for 100 bars, and it's still blocking, even though, right, even though if we take a look at that, right, so even though this is where we got another swath of signals coming in here, and let's just identify that, and let's identify this area. Alright, it's kind of helpful to draw stuff on your chart so you can identify the areas here. So if I'm looking at now the signal blocker, so what happens is a signal came through and it blocked for 100 bars, and it was still blocking when we got the first short signal here. Still blocking. So the signal blocker has all different kinds of ways that you can turn off the blocking. In other words, you can reset the blocking. So right now it's resetting every 100 bars, but we want to reset it. We want some other conditions to reset it. So if we take a look at the AND node, so let's reset it when there's no signal. Right? So these blank areas where there's no signal, let's use that to reset the signal blocker. So let's go in here. So let me zoom in. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see the signal blocker has an input and a reset. So we're only using the input right now, so there's nothing connected to the reset. So what we can use is when we get input, no signal. So remember, if we take a look at so we're looking at what is going into the input. And we can see here's the areas of no signal. So with the signal blocker, I can take this input, and when there's no signal at the input, I can reset the signal blocker. And voila, look at here. Our signal, our short signal, just popped over and matched our arrow. Right? This one just popped over and it matched our triangle. So remember, our triangles are showing the areas where we had the long continuous signals. Let's scroll down here, right? So remember, here's this area, here's this area, arrow, and this is where the signals ended on the dot, right? And that is the signal area, the white rectangle. And there's the first long signal bar, and we're getting a signal there. So I'd say it looks like that's all we need. Let's see, let's take a look at this area here. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, so we got a bunch of, right, signals turning on, turning off, turn on for a little bit, turn off, and yeah, I'd say that matches with here. So, alright, so using the signal blocker is how you get the first bar with the signal. And in this case, we want to reset the signal blocker when there's no signal. All right, so this is the entry. So, all right, so let's see. We'll call this call it the first bar, yeah. All right, we'll just call this the first signal bar only. Something like that. So we're only getting the first signal bar. All right, so now the second part of the question is, let's see, let me get this forward here. All right, so now we want to identify the bar with the diamond. So in other words, we want to identify the first bar that has no signal, right, where there's an absence of these signals here. And let me think about that for a moment. All right. I think, yeah, the way I'm going to approach this, I'm going to test this out. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I can quickly test it. Is what I'm going to try and do is I think I'm going to invert. Yeah, I'm going to invert these signals here, right? So what we're seeing are the entry signals. So I'm going to invert these entry signals, which should basically turn off the signal when there is one and turn on the signal when there is no signal, right? Invert it. So I'm going to invert it, not reverse it, but invert it. So let's see. So I'm going to do this in a separate logic template. So I'm going to make a copy here. And I don't think I'm going to need that signal blocker, but I'll throw it off to the side. And let's grab a inverter. Okay, so if I look at BloodHound's output, so right here, right, so I'm getting a short here where there used to be no signal, right? So remember, in between, so this, here, let's color code this guy. Alright, so these rectangles are, right, identifying where the original trace signal is, and let's see, I should put one here for these longs as well, huh? Okay. So looking back upon this, right, everything's inverted. So I'm getting a short, all right, a short output now where there used to be a blank area. And since I inverted it, same thing happens with the long side. So remember, here's used to be, this is where the long signals were. So whenever there wasn't a long signal, I'm getting a long output. So that's a true invert. So let's see, let's filter this out. Yeah, let's filter this out. So let's see, I have one of these guys built. So so this solver is looking at the 50 and 200. All right, so I think I can use this filter to filter this out, to filter that invert out. Let's see, so let's grab an AND node, connect that in there. we'll connect this guy and see what we get. Hey, there we go. So now, so now we're marking all the areas where there was no signal. However, let's see, actually let me read Leonardo's question again. I just want to see what I think what we have marked now is supposed to be the exit signals. So let me just double check. Alright, well, yeah, so Leonardo doesn't clarify if these are to be exit signals, but we'll just make the assumption that they are. Actually, hold on. There's more here to read. Just a moment. Oh, okay. Nope. Alright, so I'm just going to make an assumption that these are supposed to be exit signals. So, if so if we're in a short trade, then for an exit we want a long signal, right? So the opposite signal will exit the trade. So if we generate so here we go. So we're generating short signals. So we need a long signal to exit that short. So I need to swap, or I need to reverse this short to a long signal. So we can just use our long short modifier like so, and the default mode is set to swap. So we can see it just swapped the short for a long, and then it swapped our long over here for a short. Just reversed it. So let's see, I'm gonna rename this. Alright. So I just renamed this modifier. Makes it a little shorter on the board. You see how it kind of shortened it up too. So the name was shorter, so it shortened it up. So that's kind of helpful. Sometimes, if you like having this all placed nice and orderly like so, it can get awful long sometimes. So shortening the name can help shorten the objects on the board. Like I can shorten that guy, and there. Alright. So, okay, so we have our long signals to exit our short trades here. And so if this is being used as an exit, you really don't need to clean this up any. If you're using as an exit into Raven, you don't really need to clean this up any, because this long signal, which is going to exit a short trade, you can only exit a trade once, right? If you're flat, you're flat. You can't keep exiting. And so this will not put you into a long position. It's only going to flatten the trade. Okay, so just to kind of get into this a little bit. Oh, looks like my data feed is gone. Let's connect this back up here. Get my data feed going. So, if you're using this as an exit in Raven, so with Raven here, right, this exit logic, this only exits the trade. It only puts the trade flat. It'll never enter a trade, right? Only entry logics can actually enter a trade. So therefore, as an exit signal, you really don't need to clean this up. You'd only need to clean this up if possibly, we had if we had a short signal that happened during, this exit signal. that's the only time you need to clean that up. But just for the sake of addressing Leonardo's question, he wants to see a nice clean signal. So let's do that. So here we go. Remember, we got this signal blocker here. So let's just feed this guy into that signal blocker, like so. And there we go. So we have, right, signals now when there's a blank area, right, when the no signal started. So we got an exit signal on that diamond, and on that diamond there. Let's see, let me give this a name here. Here we go. So there's our exit when the signal ends. Alright, so here's the first one we built, the first signal bar only. And, oh, looks like I didn't leave that in the correct state. Let's take a look. Ah, yep, there we go. Connect up our signal blocker. Alright, so there's the first signal. Right, and then let me, there we go, center that a little bit. Okay, and then there's the exit when the signal ends. So there's our long signal to exit a short trade. And, all right, so I think that does it for Leonardo's question. Let me see if there's any follow-up questions on this. Yeah, so I guess let me kind of just go over this briefly. Right, so this is the original signal, right? So let's name that. We can call that our signals. Let's see, and this guy's identifying when there is no signals. All right, so to get to the no signals, I had to invert the signals, and then I kind of cleaned it up. I cleaned it up by using one of the solvers I had to kind of clean it up from the invert, and then had to do some more signal manipulation, and then put it through a signal blocker. So that's how we got the areas where the signals end. So. And so for anybody else, if you got a system that gives you a bunch of signals like this in a row, something like that, and you'd like to clean it up, that's what the signal blocker does. Alright, yeah, so Leonardo did confirm that what he was looking for is when the signal ends, right? When the signal's ended, that would be the exit criteria. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I don't see any other questions. There's no more questions on the board, so we'll wrap it up, call it a day, and start the weekend. All right. So yeah. So just a reminder, guys. So so as I asked earlier, as I started the workshop off, if you want to send in your questions, so it sounds like Leonardo did send his question in by email, but I'm guessing you probably sent it in this morning, Leonardo, so I didn't have a chance to look at it. Usually I don't. So just a reminder, guys, if you do have questions that you'd like to see, please try and send it in by Thursday, right? So not late Thursday, but sometime Thursday during the day, so that way I have time to take a look at it and prepare for it as well. So if I had gotten this question earlier, I would have had a chart already set up, ready to go to start addressing Leonardo's question. So it just kind of gives me sending your questions in early just kind of helps me out prepare and stuff like that. So let's see, for anybody else who's new, if you have a Big Mike's Elite membership, there is a section on Big Mike's for us. It's in the auto trading Elite section. Yeah, I think it's the Elite auto trading section of Big Mike's. But here's a direct link. You just go to bigmikes.com and then /shark indicators -bloodhound. That'll take you straight to it. And this area on Big Mike's is not for tech support. So we're a company, so we're not allowed to cruise Big Mike's and post stuff in it. And Big Mike's is not a tech support area, at least not for companies. So we don't respond on there. This is just for you guys to collaborate together, in building an automated system. You guys can collaborate, address, various issues, concerns, things obviously related to automated systems, and how to maybe implement them in BloodHound or things like that. So you guys can work together. So I can't tell you that one of our customers, Julie Wade, she started several postings up there talking about her trading style and whatnot. So there already is a bunch of stuff up there, related to some BloodHound systems. All right. Well, yeah. With that, I don't see any last minute questions coming in here. So I'll say, guys, have a good day, have a good rest of your day, and have a good weekend.